Hi everyone, my name is Nyandia.
And I'm Rachel, and welcome to the SheSays podcast.
We are part of SheSays, a global network of over 60,000 women in more than 50 cities around the world.
SheSays is committed to being a real voice for creative women.
And on this podcast, we will be exploring the ebbs and flows of being a creative woman in Kenya.
Our goal is to connect Kenyan creative women, give them a voice, and co-create with the SheSays global network.
Hey Rachel.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm pretty good, excited for today's guest.
Right, we have Sharon Neema on our show today, and Sharon is a self-taught visual artist, and I'm super excited to hear about her creative journey and just to get to know all things Sharon this morning.
Right, like I was scrolling through her Instagram page, and it's so many cool things all happening on there, and I just want to dive more into how she creates and what her mind thinks when she's doing her work.
Right, and it's also her birthday, so this is a birthday episode. Happy birthday, Sharon.
Happy birthday!
Hi, Sharon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. Welcome to the She Says podcast. I'm Nyandia. This is Rachel, and we're excited to speak with you today. We are going to ask you to just introduce yourself.
My name is Sharon Neema. I'm an artist, but also a student. I'm in the middle of studying psychology right now. I'm doing my undergraduate. I'm a visual artist predominantly, though I also write a bit, but visual art is my main expression, I guess I would say. So I do painting, pencil work, but I also do digital collages, like surreal digital collages. So those are all the creative ways I express myself, I would say. Yeah.
So my next question was going to be, what do you consider, or do you consider yourself a creative? Because now you're saying you're doing a degree in psychology, which is so fascinating. Yeah. So do you consider yourself a creative person, and what does it mean to be creative to you?
I think maybe I struggle more with the word creative. I think I'm more settled in calling myself an artist, but I think it's just a perception of creatives as people who their creative thing is their main thing that they do. Yeah, so because I am studying psychology, that is kind of more my main thing that I do every day. And art, or my creative side, is just kind of like an expression as opposed to my job, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in terms of just being a creative person, I would say that I am. People tend to just think of me as a creative person. I think it's just natural, so I don't think of myself as I am doing creativity. I am doing a creative thing. It's just, yeah.
I'm so fascinated by the psychology, and I really could go on about that.
I'm gonna there was something that I saw when I was scrolling through your Instagram that really spoke to me. I'm gonna read out the caption that you put on one of your images. It said, the journey to calling yourself a creative or an artist can be a weird one, riddled by doubts and clouded by imposter syndrome feelings. But yes, I'm an artist and a creative. Even in the moments of self-doubt and creative block and fear, I'm still a creative. So when I read that, I was like, that's literally the thing that I super resonate with that whole idea of calling yourself a creative. Is very difficult. It's we don't allow ourselves to call ourselves creatives, which you also just touched on it. Do you remember realizing that you are a creative person? If you look back in your earlier years, when was the point at which you were I'm creative, and what did that feel to you?
I think probably when I started calling myself an artist would be more something that I can place in time, because creativity is something that has, I think, always just been a part of my life from the time I was a kid. My parents have always been super supportive of my creative pursuits, whether that's buying paints or whatever other things I wanted to just mess around with, which is interesting because they're both in the medical field, and that's not usually thing of parents who are in the medical field being super supportive of creative pursuits. But I remember from the time I was a kid always having sketchbooks and doing little drawings. But I think calling myself an artist was probably after my first exhibition was the first time that I was okay, I'm an artist. I can call myself that. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So you said you're in school for psychology, your parents are in the medical space. I'm assuming you haven't been to school for creativity or anything art related. Or like has education
No.
had any influence on your creative path?
I mean, I think I made a very conscious decision that I didn't want to study art in university. Out of my experience studying art at A level, where I enjoyed the classes, that was all great. I enjoyed the learning aspect of it, but just the word's just gone. But the way that they would grade it, like the whatever, like trying to make this very subjective thing into like an objective measure, was something that I really struggled to like understand and accept. So I think that's why I just didn't study it. But in terms of like in A levels, I did art, I did English literature, I did English language. So I think that was really helpful in terms of just developing the more intellectual side of my appreciation for art. So art history is something that I've always like kind of had as a backup plan in case I wanted to study something more art related. So yeah, just in terms of the more intellectual thinking theory side of art, I think education definitely impacted my appreciation of that.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I'm curious because when you say that you made a conscious effort not to study it, I wonder if that has to do with the fact that you're an expressive artist, so that it's not something like a technical, creative, what do I want to say? Like I went to school for graphic design, right? And as much as my degree is a fine arts degree, it was more focused towards communication using visuals. So that's very different from being able to just express yourself. And I wonder if that is part of the reason. I'm just thinking as you're saying, if the fact that you're doing expressive art could be a big influence in choosing not to have an educational influence around your art. Because I can see how someone trying to grade something that's from the inside, like you can't change what you're trying to like put out, so you can't really grade it. So that's interesting. But I don't know, is that because of the kind of art that you do that you maybe chose not to have further education in the art space, or do you think it's the ability of the school to, because I feel like education should still be able to support that kind of expressive art, right? And so I wonder if that's a handicap on the educational side, or if it's just a personal choice because you knew the space that you were trying to occupy with your art.
I'd say both. In terms of, so on the educational aspect, for example, the grades that I got for my art in A levels, even my teachers were like, I don't understand why you got this grade when we've seen your work. So I think that was also just like a disappointment of like, I don't want to be disappointed in something that I was proud of just because of the way that it was graded or perceived in this educational space. But also, I think thinking about it now, because the work that I make is very personal, a lot of it is just like trying to understand me, self and identity, then I think, like you said, it is harder to put that within an educational sphere or space and make it something that can be like objectively, what's the word? I guess graded, yeah.
Do you feel that you kind of like because your art is more self-expressive, and I honestly, I look through your page and I love everything that you do because it just shows that you're creating like from the heart. But like, do you ever find yourself comparing to like people who've studied art, for example, or have you ever had those experiences?
Maybe not, but just because the type of work that I appreciate tends to just be like more expressive. So even if the person did like study art, it doesn't show up as like an academic thing. Yeah. Okay. But I think in comparison, it's more just like learning instead of comparing. So like composition, like how someone puts together a painting. And it's like, I like this. I don't know why this composition is good, but I like this. And I'll like try and seek to understand what is it, what specifically about how they composed it makes it appealing to the eye. Yeah. And that's probably something that they learned in school that I'm just learning from looking at people's work. But yeah, I don't think it's comparison. I think, yeah, it's just more appreciation and like learning in a different environment than like a strictly academic school classroom environment.
Uh-huh. You mentioned that you've done a show before. So would you consider pursuing a career in art, or is it something that will stay in the hobby lane for you?
That's a question I don't think I have an answer to.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So like, for example, my experience with doing a show taught me a lot about how I didn't know what doing a show is like. And that I didn't really have anyone guiding me. It was just kind of, I thought, okay, I'll do art. It will be up. And that's it. After the shows, I was learning about things like you need to have like a certificate for every piece of art that you make, showing that it's an authentic one, so that if someone purchases it, you also give them a certificate. I'm like, I didn't know this at all. If someone had bought my work, I'd just be like, yeah, we exchanged money and that's it. Yeah, or getting a certificate to say that you were in an exhibition. I think like that aspect, I just was very clueless about.
Okay.
And I think now moving forward, where I'm at right now, I think I want to try and mix my art with the psychology. And I don't know about having art be like the main thing, but I would love to do more exhibitions and things like that.
For me, I feel like there's a beauty in like almost like the innocence of not knowing but just doing, and then you'll find out as you're doing, which is something that I find as a creative. There's a lot of times I overthink things before I've even started doing it. So I think when you say like you didn't know anything about putting a show, I think that in itself is good because you just did it and it was done, and it was like, okay, you find out all the certificate and all that stuff that kind of comes after. So it doesn't really like come as a blocker for you. So I think that's cool. Who would you say have been your greatest influences in your life?
In my life or in my art?
Whichever one. Or both, you know.
I think artistically, there is a Mexican-born painter called Frida Kahlo, who is like, I love her work so much, so much. Like, I think especially just how much of herself she puts in her work, I think has always just been, when I found her, I was like, guys, why is not everyone else speaking out about this? We could talk about Picasso and Van Gogh, but like Frida Kahlo. And I think as more and more people have gotten to know her, it's been really nice to see her appreciated in that way. So I think just in terms of art, that's been a really big influence. In terms of life, I feel like thankfully, I don't know how this works, but I tend to just be surrounded by very creative people. A lot of my friends are creative in some way, usually not in the way that I am, so they might write or make music. But I think, honestly, my friends are also a very big influence. Yeah.
So when you create, is it something that you do consciously on a schedule, or is it just like you get inspired and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna make something? How do you stay motivated? How do you continue to learn? Like, because it's easy to get into a space where you're like, okay, I figured it out, let me just keep working. But I know you mentioned something about looking at other artists and seeing and observing some technical things they might do that change how their art comes across. So for you, how do you stay motivated in your work? Do you produce based on the inner clock saying, okay, it's time to go make something? Or is it something that you consciously say, I'm going to do this many this month? Yeah, so how do you continue to learn and stay motivated?
I would love to create on a schedule. I really would. I would love to be super consistent and say every week we're going to do like 3 pieces. That would be amazing. If there's a switch in my brain I could turn on and have that would be great. But it's just always more tended to be, maybe I look at someone's work and get inspired from that, or there's just an idea that I have in the back of my head. I am a collector of notebooks. There are lots of notebooks with just like scribbled down ideas.
Well, you are not alone. Trust us.
I probably have too many, and you just keep collecting, and they all have different purposes. Yeah. So I think also just like looking back at stuff that I've written and being like, oh, there's an idea that probably at the time I didn't know how to make it come to fruition, but now there's something that I have now that I didn't have then that helps it work. Yeah. So honestly, right now it's just kind of when the bug hits and the focus and motivation hits as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I did Inktober last year, and that was hard, but that was also, I think, a really good thing to do because just create like doing something every day for a month also showed me that I can do that. There's something there that I could possibly do that, and I think that also helped just kind of work through self-doubt because I made sure that I was posting everything that I drew. So even if it was terrible on one day, I was just like, okay, we're just still gonna post it and we can come back to it later. So I think creating on a more consistent schedule is something that I would like to like work towards more because I think there's growth in that I would have. But yeah.
I think something that really resonates with me is what you just said about you have loads of notebooks, which I'm also like, yeah. I used to think I was alone, but I've been meeting a lot more like notebook hoarders. So. But like the whole idea of writing things down, but I think what's most important is like looking back at what you've written down, because that in itself brings some ideas to life instead of them just living in these notebooks. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, or living in books as well. Because I think that's also a problem from not just writing down, but like doing a quick sketch and being like, this will be a painting one day, but just like leaving it in its sketch form as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I have shoe boxes of notebooks. So like you're saying notebooks, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like a thing. Because like I collect notebooks. Some of them are too cute to actually write on. So I just look at them and I'm just like, so cute. And then I put it back and I never do anything. And then I have some that I write one page and then I never touch it again. And then I go to another one and it's like, oh, I like the paper on this one. And then I doodle on it. And then I forget about it. So I think there's something there about creative people and notebooks. It's like, and then I don't think I've ever visited a country or a city and not come back with a notebook. Even if it was ugly, like I have a notebook from like almost anywhere anyway, like we could talk about notebooks and Frida Kahlo a whole episode and I wouldn't. We talked a bit about all the different ways that you create and the channels that you use to express yourself. Is there something that you didn't mention that you use for expression that is not necessarily something you look at as I do this as an artist, but it's something that, I mean, some people have knitting, some people have like singing as just like a thing. Because I think creative people tend to express in so many different diverse ways, but usually we'll have one thing, which is like, I do this, but I could also do this. I could also cook. I could also.
It just reminded me of this quote that I really need to find who said it because I think it's one of those that's also just been like very central to my creative life. Of like you said, a lot of artists have a lot of ways that they express themselves creatively, and it's sometimes it's because one thing can't express something exactly the way this other thing can. So I think for me, I mentioned writing a bit, so I do like write poetry. I don't like to call it poetry, but it technically is. But that's expression that's like very. I think it's personal in the same way that my visual art is personal, but it's a lot less. There's no space to hide behind interpretation. Like it's words on a page, and the words on the page have meaning, and that's it. Whereas with a visual piece, it's more like, what do they mean? What does this color represent? So writing, I make jewelry as well. Sometimes.
Is that what's going on with your fingers?
I love how you just
these I did make. These I did make, but okay. Yeah, I just like fiddling around with like beads and wire is fun. I used to wear like safety pin rings a lot.
Interesting. The other day I went, I don't know where I was, and I was like wearing this neck piece that like, it's a piece of rock that I collected in Moranga, and then a piece of metal I collected I don't know where, and it's like just like a really long neck piece. And this guy stopped me like, where did you get this? And I'm like, in the shamba, like what do I say, and it was literally a piece of wire, I mean like a chain from like a broken necklace that I put back together. So that's very interesting that I think like a whole room of creatives doing something would be a bit insane. Like it would be interesting to see what could happen,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. But I would be very curious to see your writing, just because you have the psychology going and then you have the writing, and then I can see how guarded you are about labels. Like you're just like, okay, like so I'm an artist, but like I don't like to call myself a creative, and like words have meaning, and I don't like to call them poems, but they're like poems technically. So I would really like to see your writing. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah.
Do you have any mentors or someone, whatever your definition of mentorship is?
I think I have people who are older who are also creative. I don't know how to define mentor.
So, for example,
I'd say no, just in my understanding of mentor as someone who's like very specifically and focusedly like helping you increase or like grow in a specific field. So in that, I'd say no. Yeah.
I have another kind of difficult question because a lot of people have difficulty knowing how to answer this. So, who have you influenced in your journey?
Oh.
I know it's a difficult one.
It is. I think just I don't know. Maybe they've just like not come and told me directly. And I have.
Chance to call out and ask.
Yeah, guys, tell me, please. Please tell me if I've influenced you. I think influence is a hard one because it makes it seem like if there were. Yeah, I'm not someone's Frida Kahlo. I don't think
that you know of.
Yeah, that I know of. Yeah, I think something that I do appreciate is when like I tell people how I do like my digital collages, and those I just like literally do them on my phone. Like free app. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Stop it. Okay, we need to talk us through, because I thought if you asked me and I was scrolling through, I thought you like spend time on Photoshop.
No, those are like usually phone selfies and Visco to like change colors, and PixArt. There's an app called PixArt, and I just use that to
And she says, "I'm not creative. I call myself a wow. That's amazing.
That is so crazy." So like, okay, so like I'm trying to just like before we get into our rapid fire questions, because I think we've gotten through the main conversation about creativity, but I'm still stuck on the psychology, just because I feel maybe I need a shrink or like I need like psychological something. But like because that was going to be my major. Like when I was young, it was either design or psychology. And I remember for a long time, I really still thought I would go back to school and do psychology, but it was school, and I was like, yeah, I've had enough school for now.
Yeah.
So what do you intend to do with your psychology degree, or are you doing something with it already?
I think it's interesting that for you that's what you wanted to do and then did something else, because I wanted to do literature at first, like straight out of high school. I was planning to do literature, and then took a gap year that turned into 4 gap years. And in that time, psychology kind of became like, okay, maybe this is what I want to do. So that's what I ended up pursuing.
Yeah.
I think my love for psychology is that it's not something that is very boundaried. Like there's not, you can really go into many different things with psychology. So like in psychology classes, there's some where we've been talking about like how the brain works. And I'm like, I see how this translates to art.
Yes.
Like you learn about like the elements of art, and just the way your brain takes in information is the same way.
Same way,
so I think there's just, right now I'm just kind of like, I'm going to do psychology and then afterwards kind of like see where we can go with this. But I think what right now, a direction that I would want to go in is art psychology with children, because I think that's definitely, an important thing that we always need more of.
Yeah.
But also, I think something you said earlier about like if you had a bunch of creatives in a room, like that would be like a very great space to be in, and that's something that I've always wanted to kind of create spaces like
Yeah.
that where you can just have creative people come together and talk about processes and how they create and what the like thought processes are behind their work. And I think just like learn from each other,
Yeah.
see how we're all like very similar, even if it's different fields that you're in within art and creativity. There's still like very central things of how we think and process that is shared between everyone. But also it would be nice to like see like someone might put words to something that you're like, I do that. I didn't know how I do it, but that's something that I do. So I think
it's like we're listening to you talk, and Rachel and I like
we're literally like my neck hurts from like
because one of the things we really want to do with SheSays is to eventually get women like physically together. But with Corona and all this right now, it's kind of like the logistics of like physical connection are a bit more complicated and complex. But like one of the things we've been kind of bouncing back and forth between the two of us is that we would like to be able to have workshops where like there's no structure, because like literally every creative women we've talked to so far is so them. And so like we want to see like if we throw it all against the wall, what's going to stick, what's going to happen. Like, so I'm very excited to hear you say that, because clearly there's a need for us to kind of open our spaces to one another in a way that's like going to inspire and grow us all as creative women in different ways. And sometimes it's just even nice to just look at what other people are doing, because I think as creatives it's very easy to get into your cubbyhole and just not get out. Like we're just happy like doing what we do, putting it out there, like just let's not do the other stuff. Like I just want to make and like show, and that's it. So I'm so excited, and she's so excited. We're just listening to you and going like,
when you do start those, please let me know. I will come with like my gang of friends who are all also like, I've mentioned that idea to a couple and they're like, yes, please, let's please do this.
Wow. So, it might be something you think.
And I think, but I think also having a space that's like not necessarily like established people as well. So it's just kind of like you don't have to I don't know have this many numbers.
Say no more. Say no more. Literally, because like one of the things is like some of the people we've been asking to come on the podcast, they're like, but me, like, why would you want me on the podcast? Like, I'm not so and so or such and such. And it's like, no, those people already have paths defined. We're trying to speak to people who are in a different space. Not that we are against already established people, but there's so much happening on the undercurrent that no one is talking about and no one is seeing. And so we totally get you on the established. Like, established doesn't necessarily mean like it's exclusive. Like those are the only people who can be amazing. There's a lot of amazing things happening on the creative space that just don't get any amplification. So that is so exciting. So as we speak about all this, one of the things I'm thinking is like, what would a better creative Kenya look like for you? What is one of the things that this country could do better for you as a creative woman or girl? Or like how would you, what does that look like? I can't talk.
I think one big one is kind of what you guys are already doing, which is just like connecting creative women together so that you don't always feel like you're alone or that the only other people doing these things are like men in, but that you have other women that you can like have a conversation with and like share about your process and your journey. I think that's really important. And I think it would also help kind of like not make it seem like there's only like a limited number of spaces available to creative women to like succeed. That's something that has just been like, I get very annoyed about it. Like we don't always have to like be seeing the same people. There's space for all of us. And it doesn't have to be like a competitive thing of like, if I am like succeeding and doing well, that you're not. Like we can collaborate, we can work together, we can do a show and like do a joint show, things like that.
I love it.
I think that would make, I think, even the more systemic things of like creative life in Kenya is hard and expensive, and it would make a lot of those things just like harder easier. It would make it easier to navigate the
Yes.
more systemic stuff if there was that connection and collaboration.
So it's interesting what you're saying, because I think as we wrap up, one of the things that I've really seen I've never made an effort in my creative journey to obviously reach out to other creatives. It's always been like, I'm just looking at you from like the corner and being like, wow, but then through this organization now, I'm having to like send an email randomly to like a person I don't know and be like, hi Sharon, my name is so and so, we would like to have, and these conversations have literally opened a whole new world for me, because even in just speaking to one another, you learn things which you struggle with, and it's like somebody else has had the same struggle and has already figured out a different way of doing it. So it's true what you say, that the collaborative exercise between creatives, I think, would kind of ease the systemic problems a bit more, because there's also parts of us that have figured out the little kinks that are there. There's definitely a long way to go, but I think you're right. And that basically is the end of our creative session. But to wrap up, we usually have our rapid fire question session. There's 6 quick questions. It's just one word answers. You could try, because most creators can't give you one word answers. They're like, yeah, so like, no, it's just one word, right? So if you're ready, start. So the first question, if you had to be any of these things, what would you like to be? A is a member of the opposite sex. B is a clock. C is a pair of shoes. D is a duck. Tell us.
A clock.
A clock. Why?
I don't know. That's like the one that like stuck. I think just because I'm like, wait, I've never thought about that, to just like be a clock. I think you like witness a lot of interesting things. Yeah, because like clocks usually they're placed in like a central place in a room, so that they're like easy to see. So I think there'd be a lot to witness. Yeah, that's why.
Clock the same again now. I'm like,
one thing you do as a mentor to your younger self.
One thing I would say or do.
Do or say.
Try. I think that's what I would say. Just like try. Like don't be afraid of it not working out. That's still something I'm learning. It's a conversation I had with a friend of mine recently about how like sucking at things is hard, and it stops you from trying things out because you're gonna suck at first before you get better. But yeah, so to just try. I think that's what I'd tell my younger self and my present self, and probably my future self for a bit longer. But yeah.
So when you think about the things that you've created, is there something you created that you hated and people loved?
I don't know about hated, but like something that I wasn't completely satisfied with, for sure. With the last exhibition I did, there's a couple paintings that I was like, this is okay, but I wish I had like another month to like work on it. But people loved it. So I think now I'm like struggling with, I want to paint over these things, but people liked it. But I'm not, yeah. So yeah, definitely. Yeah.
The best advice that you have ever been given?
I think again, just like, just do it. Just try it small with like whatever you do have in front of you. I think I was talking to someone I only know from like Instagram, and he was I was saying how he'd like print t-shirts, and I was like, this is very cool. I've been like wanting to like make t-shirts for the longest time, and he was just like, just try it. Do like 10, do like 5, and just like start with that, and wherever it goes is where it goes. But yeah, so again, just like starting.
Yeah. So what is the biggest opposing force you would say that you've encountered on your creative journey?
Myself.
Wow.
That's an easy one. Myself. I think just self-doubt is evil and terrible, and yeah, just like doubting that, yeah. But it's also something that I've been like trying to see as a pushing force instead of as a barrier. There's this really great quote by someone called Ira Glass, and if you just like search Ira Glass and the gap, and they talk about the gap between where we are and where we want to be, and how that gap shows that we have taste. Like if you look at your work and you're like, I don't quite like it, it shows that you have taste for what really great work is. And it's in working to like fill that gap that we grow and get better and get better. Yeah.
If you could interview a creative person, past or present, who would that be?
Frida Kahlo.
I knew you were going to say it.
No other answer.
Just having a conversation with her would be great. Yeah.
She's amazing, and she's like a perfect person to wrap up our episode. I'm such a Frida Kahlo fan, and so I'm always excited when somebody else loves her because I think she was so radical and crazy, but her work was so amazing and her process was so amazing, and I think she was so uncompromised in what she wanted to do that I think that, I don't know if you watched her movie, like of her life.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Anyway, so the Frida Kahlo episode is not today, but like maybe we can have another future follow-up Frida Kahlo episode because I think she's amazing. But
yes, please.
Super awesome talking to you. I don't know if you have any closing remarks. Maybe you can let people know where they can find you on social media. And yeah, any closing comments?
Sharon Neema with one N is my Instagram that I use most frequently. I also have the same problem with Instagram accounts as I do with notebooks. So I'm like, I have multiple. They don't need to be multiple. But like, if you find me on Sharon Neema, yeah, that's probably the easiest place to find me. Closing remarks. I don't know, I really enjoyed this. I think I just really enjoy conversations about art and creating, and especially like the process behind them. So thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming. That was amazing.
That was a really, really, really good conversation with Sharon. And I'm so excited to keep meeting all these amazing artists and creatives.
Right? Super exciting. I mean, it's really interesting to see how we all have a gap, and the gap is connection. The gap is a space where we can all feel legit in our pursuit of creative. But I like that she expressed the idea that the spaces are not limited, because sometimes it feels that we operate in a space that's very already taken. And so it was an interesting and exciting conversation. And just hearing a person that has combined the sciences and art and is doing it from an not uneducated, but like not using a formal art education to pursue her art expression was very exciting for me.
Yeah, and I think also, that it just shows us the need to get away from these so-called exclusive spaces, especially like in Nairobi, where it's only just the few known people who are allowed to kind of play in this creative space. So I think just talking to her validates the need literally for just these spaces that allow just anyone who considers themselves creative to come and just be themselves. So that was really cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. And it really was another confirmation that we're onto something here when we're trying to connect creative women around Kenya. And so, kudos, Sharon, and we see you.
And as usual, you can find us on SheSays Kenya on Instagram. So give us a follow, and there's more guests to come.
Fantastic.
Listen to the SheSays podcast episodes on Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.